Yeah. So it's an interesting time and an interesting business. And even in 2009, before the market tanked, my construction interest that I was paying, for the properties that I was building, and I was paying 9.75% construction interest on multi-million-dollar properties, and that was good. That was a good interest rate. So it's interesting where we're at now. So, so I have two backgrounds, restaurants and construction. And I was working in a restaurant, and this guy was building an addition, and he hired me to come clean up after him. And I'm a hard worker, so he liked me. So I started following him around and learning construction, cleaning up, and then did the next thing and the next thing. So fast forward, I moved to the Outer Banks in 1997. I'd gotten out of the military. I was in the, construction and restaurants. I had my own little construction company, and I'd work restaurants in the evening. And in 1997, we decided to move to the Outer Banks of North Carolina, which is a resort island off the coast of North Carolina, summer beach vacation destination. It's where the Wright brothers took off and first flight, happened. So I moved there, and I started a little remodeling company. I was going to open a restaurant, and ended up doing construction instead. It was a very busy time, and there was, nobody could get anything done. Nobody could find anybody to do any work for them, like little stuff. So I had some skills, and it was just me, my truck, and my tools. And I started out remodeling houses and doing handyman work. And my first year, we did 250,000 in sales. 7 years later, I was one of the largest builder developers, doing 30 million a year. And I started 12 companies along the way at the same time, and quit smoking and lost weight at the same time, and all of that, right? So by what happened was I was doing work for some investors that were buying beach houses, adding value to them, like a pool, hot tub, elevator, and then increasing the rent and then selling them, just kind of like you do with apartments or anything else. But they were doing these with single family homes, because these things rented for a lot of money. I mean, the bigger beach houses would rent for $200,000-$300,000 a year, big oceanfront houses. So they were like commercial properties. And then I had a friend who was a real estate developer, and he taught me how to build spec houses by doing it with him. So I was the builder. I found the land, did the building, and did all that. He was supposed to be the money. And what happened was I got completely taken advantage of. He really cheated me big time, but I learned, really valuable lessons from that whole process. And, he was supposed to be the money. I was just supposed to be the builder. Turned out that, that I ended up being the builder and the money and signing on the loans. I mean, all these different things. He took total advantage of me, and we were supposed to sell the houses, split the profits. He decided he wanted to keep them, so he was going to buy me out. We were both on the notes for these houses. He went and refinanced them, pulled the equity out, and didn't even tell me.
Whoa.
And, yeah. And I didn't even know how you could do that. Right. I didn't even know how you could do that. But back then he did. And, so it was really interesting, that whole process. But I learned a ton in that process. I ended up making some money, but, I got cheated out of a couple $100,000 on about 5 houses that we built together. And the sad story was that at the time, he was the husband of my wife's best friend. They were, maid of honor at each other's weddings, and it just totally destroyed that relationship, because he was just a cheat, and not a very moral individual at all.
Now,
that was my first experience building spec houses. So right out of the gate, I learned the hard way and totally got taken advantage of.
Wow.
And I was a builder, general contractor. I'd built my business. I'd already been there, 4 or 5 years. And I started getting into, bigger projects, building spec houses. And he came along and said, hey, I'm going to teach you how to be a developer, and this is what we're going to do. So anyways, that was early on in my career, and it taught me a lot, learned a lot of great lessons. So I took all of that and just learned and moved forward, and it just kept going from there. So I was in an area where a lot of very sophisticated developers were coming down from Northern Virginia, the DC area, in the northern part of the states. That's kind of who owned property in this area, and that's who vacations. So it was New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. Those are the number one renter demographics. That's who goes there for summer vacation. Then your number one owner demographic was Northern Virginia, Richmond, DC, the DC suburbs, Maryland. And then you start getting up into the Connecticut's and, a few people in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York that own property there. But the number one demographic was Virginia. I'm from Virginia. My whole family's from there. So I made connections with these developers that were coming down to the beach and doing things. And I started learning from them, and then following them around in their areas and getting involved with deals and projects that they were doing outside of the area. So that's kind of how I learned the business. I always wanted to be a builder. I always had that in me. As a little kid, I played with, Tinker toys and
Lincoln logs and
Erector sets, those types of things. And so I always, built buildings, and I always envisioned myself building buildings. I wanted to be an engineer. Wasn't smart enough. I'm not a great student, and I, couldn't do that kind of math. But I took some college courses after the military thinking I was going to be an engineer, but I just, didn't work for me. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm not a great student in the formal environment, very self-educated. I poured into myself, developed myself, and educated myself, and learned a lot about business and learned a lot about leadership. And that's how I've done what I've done as fast as I've done it, is by developing myself as a leader, delegator, motivator first, and then empowering others and leading and coaching and guiding others and building through them. So that's how I've done it. Yeah. So my goal was I wanted to build cash, so my whole thing was I'm building this business, building the company, growing things. And I wanted cash so I could invest in other assets, do bigger deals. That's kind of where I was at. So our business plan was to build these houses, sell them because I needed cash. And then that all got changed on me. So, I'm a very resilient individual, very positive minded, eternally optimistic. I have a strong faith, and everything happens for a reason. And if you look for the good in every situation, no matter how bad it is, look for the lessons. You don't dwell on the mistakes and the failures. You look for the lessons and the wisdom, and you just move forward through it. So even though I lost in that situation, that experience ended up making me millions of dollars. So the experience I gained from there, and I knew it at the time, I knew, this is no fun, but I'm going to learn, and this ain't going to happen to me again. So sometimes you just kind of have to go through things. And back then we didn't have the internet, we didn't have podcasts, YouTube, all that. You learned by doing. You learned the hard way. That was really the only way. And I consider that guy a mentor. Even though he took total advantage of me, I still learned from that situation. And he did mentor me, and he did teach me how to build spec houses and how to develop property and how to use banks and get bank financing and creative financing and all that. So there were a lot of good things that came out of it. So it just is what it is. At the, I don't know, at the end of the day, back then it was a couple $100,000. To me, it was very significant, and it would have made a difference in my life then. But the experience taught me even more.